All right, so ready to dive into some Palo Alto City Council action.
Let's do it. Always up for a little municipal intrigue.
We're time traveling back to June 2024. Got those meeting minutes warmed up, ready to break them down.
Sounds a little dry. You sure there's going to be intrigue?
Oh, trust me, it's more exciting than you might think. Imagine, trying to understand a whole city just by looking at a map, right?
Okay, I get that.
Our deep dive, it's like adding those little details. The park, the school, that one amazing taco truck everyone argues about.
Okay, so we're spicing things up. I'm liking where this is going.
Exactly. We're taking you beyond those dry agendas, showing you what makes Palo Alto tick. And in June 2024, let's just say, there was a lot ticking.
Lay it on me.
Well, first off, you had Mayor Stone presiding over it all. And of course, council members Burt, Koo, Lowing, Lifcott Hames, Tanaka, Vinker. All those familiar faces.
Right, the usual suspects.
Can't forget City Manager Shikata, City Attorney Stump, and a whole team of department heads. They're the ones who really make the city run, you know?
The behind-the-scenes heroes for sure, though I bet they have some interesting stories.
Oh, I'm sure they do. We even noticed little things, like Councilmember Tanaka wasn't at a part of the June 17th meeting, just a glimpse into the real lives of these folks. They're not just names on a page.
Makes it more human.
Exactly. And that's what we're going for here, because behind all the agendas and votes, it's the people, the residents of Palo Alto who really matter.
True. They're the ones who feel the impact of these decisions.
Their voices, their stories, that's what brings these meeting minutes to life. We'll be hearing a lot from them throughout this deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
Now, I know it's September and we're talking about June, but here's the thing.
Things move slow in local government.
Sometimes, yeah. But what we found fascinating is how these seemingly small local decisions, they end up reflecting bigger trends, stuff that's happening all over the country.
Right, like a microcosm of larger issues.
Exactly. And it makes you think, where are we headed as a society? But we'll get into that more a little later. For now, let's start with something that seems simple but actually speaks volumes.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Hit me with it.
A Pride Month proclamation. Easy to overlook, right?
Oh yeah, they're pretty common these days.
True, but Councilmember Lifcott Hames, she actually took the time to read the whole proclamation aloud.
Huh. So it wasn't just a formality.
Exactly. And in a place like Palo Alto, known for its innovation, being forward-thinking, that gesture, it really meant something. It's about more than words on a page, It's about sending a message.
Setting a tone. I get it.
Right. And speaking of setting a tone, this next one might sound a little dry. Bear with me here. They were discussing vacancies on the Historic Resource Board.
Historic preservation in Silicon Valley. Talk about a contrast.
Right. You've got this city at the cutting edge of technology, always looking to the future, but also grappling with how to preserve its past. It's fascinating.
That push and pull between progress and heritage, it's everywhere.
Totally. And that tension, it was palpable when the council went into closed session to talk about the lawsuit regarding the Black Lives Matter mural.
Ah, yes, the mural. Heard about that. Didn't go over well with everyone.
Definitely a sensitive subject. Even though it was a closed session, we did hear from one resident, Aram J., during public comment. He was concerned that the lawsuit filed by some police officers alleging harassment was a waste of taxpayer money.
I see. So right away, it's about more than just a mural.
Exactly. It opens up a whole can of worms about free speech, police accountability, how a community deals with these really tough issues. Suddenly, it's not just about art on a wall, it's about those fundamental values we were talking about earlier. And that takes us right to a topic that's basically Palo Alto's middle name.
Tech innovation.
Well, that too. But I was going to say housing. Or should I say affordable housing, or the lack of it?
Ah, yes. The elephant in the room. Or should we say, the missing neighbor everyone wishes they had.
Because let's face it, when living costs skyrocket, the people hit hardest. They're the ones keeping the city running. Teachers, caregivers, service workers.
The backbone of any community.
Right. And those June meetings, the public comments especially, they really drove that point home. Like Taddy the First, a resident from Channing House, she talked about how tough it was for the staff not being able to live anywhere near their work.
Can't be easy, caring for the elderly all day, then facing a long commute because you can't afford the rent nearby.
It's heartbreaking, honestly, and it shows how this isn't just a Palo Alto problem, right? It's that ripple effect you mentioned, that Bay Area housing crisis in a nutshell.
Absolutely. Microcosm. For sure. Makes you wonder about sustainability, about who gets to live where.
Big questions. So, with all this in mind, what was the council actually doing about it?
Well, one major project on the table was the Buena Vista Mobile Home Park redevelopment. Talk about ambitious. They were trying to transform this 105-unit park into a mix of affordable housing and renovated mobile homes.
Sounds good on paper, but I bet those meeting minutes reveal some real-life complexities.
Oh, for sure. You're
Yeah.
talking about people's homes, their community, not just numbers on a spreadsheet.
Right, and these residents, they were ready with questions, concerns, the whole nine yards.
They're fired up. Talk about density bonuses, when developers get to build more if they include affordable units. They were worried about those, about being relocated during construction, the whole impact on their lives.
Makes sense. That's a huge upheaval. Were there any specific concerns that stood out to you?
Oh, absolutely. There was this one resident, Winter D. She had a whole list of questions. How would residents be moved around? Where would community spaces like the homework club go? Would enough new trees be planted to replace the ones being removed? Even down to the color palette.
The color palette.
Yeah, the ARB, the Architectural Review Board, they didn't like the colors chosen by the residents, apparently. It was outside their purview, but still frustrating for the residents.
Shows how even the smallest details matter when it's your home, your life on the line. So, how did the housing authority respond to all this?
They tried to reassure everyone. They talked about their plans for moving people, providing transportation, setting up temporary community spaces.
Sounds like they were trying at least. What
Well,
about the tree replacement and that color palette issue?
those were still up in the air. Tough to please everyone. This whole Buena Vista thing really highlights how complex these projects can be.
No easy answers. And speaking of complex, let's move on to another housing-related item on the agenda. The North Ventura Coordinated Area Plan, or NVCIP for short.
And VCIP, there's a mouthful.
Right. Just the name sounds like a headache.
Basically, think of it as a long-term plan for the Ventura neighborhood, like a blueprint for what gets built where, how high, all that jazz.
So zoning, building heights, traffic flow, that kind of thing.
Exactly. All while trying to maintain the character of the neighborhood. It's that balancing act again, progress versus preservation.
We see that theme popping up a lot. And what was the final verdict on NVCIP?
Well, it got deferred to a later meeting, which tells you something about how much debate it was stirring up. But that's a story for another deep dive, my friend.
All right, time to talk money. Budgets, the lifeblood of any city, and let me tell you, Palo Alto's budget process is rarely boring.
High expectations, passionate residents, big dollars. Sounds like a recipe for some fireworks.
Oh, absolutely. Remember, we're talking about a city that's used to a certain level of service, and they want to know where their tax dollars are going.
Makes sense. So what were the big ticket items back in June 2024? What had everyone buzzing?
Well, the main event was the adoption of the fiscal year 2025 budget. Hold on to your hats because we're talking about a whopping $1.1 billion.
Wow, that's a lot of zeros. I guess when you're a city at the heart of Silicon Valley, you've got to think big.
Exactly. And when you break down that mountain of money, it really shows you what the city's priorities are.
Like what? Give me the juicy details.
For starters, the general fund, that's the one that covers all those essential city services we rely on every day. That clocked in at a cool $307 million.
Okay, so far so good. Keeping the lights on, the streets clean, all that good stuff.
Right, but here's where it gets interesting. A huge chunk of that money, $442 million, was earmarked for capital infrastructure improvements.
Infrastructure. It's not exactly the sexiest topic, I'll admit.
True, but it's kind of like you don't think about your plumbing until the pipes burst. Right.
Ouch. Yeah, that's a mess you don't want to deal with.
Exactly. And in a city like Palo Alto, with its rapid growth and, let's face it, some aging infrastructure, these investments are crucial.
So it's about more than just fixing potholes. It's about making sure the city can function, grow, and thrive in the future.
Exactly. And those infrastructure investments weren't just about roads and bridges. Remember the Junior Museum and Zoo?
Oh yeah, Palo Alto Institution. I have fond memories of that place from when I was a kid.
Well, they got a significant funding boost in this budget.
Now that's what I call putting your money where your mouth is. It shows they're serious about supporting families and education.
Right. Because what does that funding actually mean? New exhibits, better programs, more opportunities for kids to learn and explore. That's a concrete impact.
Agreed. Makes you feel good about where your tax dollars are going.
Though I'm sure not every budget item was met with smiles and high fives.
Let me guess. Utility rates.
Bingo! The one topic guaranteed to spark some debate.
Well, no one likes paying more, especially when it comes to those essential services. What was the reason behind the proposed increases?
The usual suspects. Maintaining and upgrading aging infrastructure, think water pipes, sewer lines, the electric grid. Plus, there was talk about replenishing those all-important reserve funds.
Okay, so far so standard. What got people riled up?
Here's where it gets interesting. There was a proposal to transfer funds from the utility fund to the general fund.
Hold on. So, using money collected from utility payers to cover other city expenses.
Essentially, yes. And let's just say that didn't go over too well with everyone.
I can imagine. It's one thing to raise rates for necessary improvements, another thing entirely to see that money potentially going to other areas.
Right. And during public comment, residents definitely voiced their concerns, especially about how these rate increases would impact folks who are already struggling to afford to live in Palo Alto.
The age-old dilemma, balancing financial stability with the real-life impact on residents. So how did the council vote? Did those utility rates go up?
They did, but it wasn't a unanimous decision. The debate over those rate hikes, it really exposed those tensions between competing priorities and the challenges of governing a diverse city like Palo Alto.
Makes you think. It's easy to sit on the sidelines and judge, but when you're the one making those decisions, impacting real people's lives, that's a whole different ballgame.
No doubt. Okay, ready to shift gears. Let's talk transportation, specifically a certain Caltrans project that had everyone fired up.
Oh boy, Caltrans. I'm already bracing myself for some controversy. They're not exactly known for their, shall we say, delicate touch. What'd they do this time?
It involved El Camino Real, that legendary road that runs right through the heart of Palo Alto. And let me tell you, it wasn't just about fixing potholes.
El Camino Real, that's a big one.
Yeah.
So what did Caltrans have up their sleeve?
Well, they were planning to repave a section, which sounds good on paper, right? But their plan included some major changes, including removing parking lanes to make way for dedicated bike lanes.
Whoa, there you have it, folks. Classic Caltrans, the masters of improving things in ways that no one asked for. I can already imagine the outcry.
Oh, you better believe there was outcry. El Camino, it's a major artery for businesses, for commuters, for everyone, really. And those parking lanes, they're like gold.
Especially in a world where everyone wants to park right in front of wherever they're going.
Exactly. So you can understand why business owners were worried.
Right. Oh, for sure. Losing those precious parking spaces, it's a legitimate concern for any business on a busy street like El Camino. Did anyone speak up about it?
Oh, absolutely. We heard from a bunch of them during public comment. Galen F. from Sundance Steakhouse, he was worried about the impact on his customers, especially those who drive from out of town. Tony L., who owns a laundromat, he pointed out that many of his clients rely on those parking spaces because they have mobility issues. It was heartbreaking.
It's those real-life consequences that sometimes get lost in these big infrastructure projects.
Right. It's not just about bike lanes versus parking spaces. It's about people's livelihoods, their ability to access essential services. It's complicated.
Speaking of complicated, how does the city council even begin to navigate this? I mean, El Camino is a state highway, right? Doesn't Caltrans have the final say?
They do, which is why the council was in a tough spot. On the one hand, they recognize that improving bike infrastructure and addressing traffic congestion is important. But on the other hand, they knew that those parking spaces were vital for many in the community.
Sounds like a classic case of damned if you do, damned if you don't. So how did they vote?
In the end, they voted in favor of the project.
Really? So bike lanes won out.
Yes, but it was more nuanced than that. It was a yes, but kind of vote. The council made it clear that Caltrans needed to address the community's concerns. They wanted a detailed parking mitigation plan, a solid construction timeline to minimize disruptions, and a commitment to ongoing collaboration with the city on security issues.
So a compromise of sorts.
Exactly. It wasn't about taking sides. It was about trying to find a way forward that worked for as many people as possible. And isn't that what local government should be all about?
Ideally, yes. Though I imagine not everyone went home happy that day.
Probably not. But that's the thing about local government. It's messy, it's complicated, and there are rarely easy answers.
True that. So here we are at the end of our deep dive into those June 2024 Palo Alto City Council meetings. We've covered a lot of ground, from heartfelt proclamations to billion-dollar budgets, from housing struggles to transportation tussles. It's been quite a ride.
It has. And through it all, I think we've gotten a glimpse into the heart of a city grappling with big questions, tough choices, and the ever-present challenge of creating a future that works for everyone. What strikes me is how these seemingly local issues, a mural, a mobile home park, a bike lane, they end up reflecting much larger conversations happening all over the country. It's a good reminder that even in a place like Silicon Valley, known for its global impact, it's often those local decisions, those close-to-home battles, that shape our daily lives in the most profound ways. So as we wrap up, I'm left wondering, what stories are being written in your community? What issues get you fired up? And what role do you want to play in shaping the future of the place you call home?
That's something to think about.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking us on this deep dive. Until next time.